Welcome to Marin Conservation League's September 6th meeting of the Land Use, Transportation, and Water Committee. We have a full agenda today, so we're going to get started. My hope with the topic that we are about to hear presentations on is that we will all gain an increased understanding of transportation planning in Marin, of Marin's transportation priorities, and how the various plans and projects that are happening right now and being planned for the future are integrated and working together to achieve Marin County's transportation priorities. So we have two wonderful speakers today to help us with that, and I'm going to introduce them now. First, I'd like to introduce Marin County Supervisor Stephanie Moulton-Peters of District 3, which includes Sausalito, the floating homes in Richardson Bay, Marin City, Tam Valley, Almonte, Mill Valley, Alto, Sutton Manor, Strawberry, Tiburon, and Belvedere. Quite a extensive amount of towns and towns and areas. Stephanie is currently serving as the County Board of Supervisors Board President. She also serves on many other commissions and boards, including the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, MTC. And she is also on the board of Golden Gate Transportation District, the Transportation Authority of Marin Board, Marin Transits Board, the Association of Bay Area Governments, ABAG, Regional Planning Committee, and she's commissioner on the Bay Development and Conservation District, BCDC, and board chair of Richardson Bay Regional Agency. Stephanie champions inclusive, transparent, responsive local government, and she has a strong commitment to partnering with communities to address challenges with innovative solutions. A top priority of hers is working with residents and local leaders in Marin City to revitalize the Marin City's Golden Gate Village public housing and provide more responsive community supporting county services and improvements to the local infrastructure there. She previously served 3 terms on the Mill Valley Council and was mayor in 2010, 2014, and 2018. And she professionally worked at PG&E, managing environmental regulatory compliance for air, water, and toxic substances, and corporate sustainability and climate change programs. She is a graduate of Stanford University's program in human biology with a concentration in environmental policy. And last summer, she completed the Harvard Kennedy School program for senior executives in local and state government. Can you hear me now, Stephanie? Okay, great. I also would like to introduce at this time and welcome San Anselmo Council member Brian Colbert. Brian was first elected to town council in 2017, where he also has served as mayor. Since this election, Brian has focused on fostering both community and a thriving local economy in both San Anselmo and countywide. Recently, when COVID prompted pandemic shutdowns, Brian actively worked with Marin Recovers to assist local businesses in keeping employees and customers safe, and he has worked to provide support of all Marin cities through his work on the Mayor's Select Committee. He helped form the Economic Vitality Strategic Plan, which focuses on Marin's long-term economic growth. And on the Marin County Council of Mayors and Council Members, Brian has advocated for improving fire prevention and emergency preparedness measures, as well as preserving open space. He spearheaded the ongoing Reimagining Creek Park effort and which has transformed a flood mitigation project into a new community park that has invigorated the historic downtown. But we've invited Brian here today because of his important roles as chair of the Transportation Authority of Marin board, and he's also vice president of the Marin Transit Board. He's promoted multimodal transit, pedestrian, and bike safety. Through his role on the TAM board, Brian is also chair of the Funding Programs and Legislation Executive Committee. He's a member of the Safe Routes to School Ad Hoc, the State Route 37 Ad Hoc, the Alternative Fuel and Electric Vehicle Ad Hoc, and the Countywide Transportation Plan Ad Hoc. Additionally, Brian is now one of Marin's representatives on the State Route 37 Policy Committee. Brian was raised in Connecticut. He attended Oberlin College, the University of College, Harris School of Public Policy, and the law school at the University of Chicago. He's worked on Wall Street and with several tech startups, and he's currently the Director of Business Development and Patient Experience for a medical practice in San Francisco. So I'd like to welcome both Brian and Stephanie. We know you both have very busy schedules, and we very much appreciate your time with us and sharing your knowledge and perspectives on this important topic. So with that, I'm going to ask Martha if you would pull up the slides. Is there anything you'd like to say before we get started on the presentation?
Yes, good morning, everyone. We are so delighted to be with you today. I see so many familiar faces. We're going to go a little into the history of Marin County and transit and transportation and planning, and many of you had a direct hand in creating the Marin County we know today. Thank you for that. And then we're prospectively going to go forward. Brian will be leading the charge on that, is to planning for our transportation future. We have some slides to share. Yeah, and then the most exciting part will be your questions after our slides. So we look forward to that.
Great.
All right. Okay, let's go to the next slide. We got those great introductions. Thank you, Kate, for that. And I just want to bring us back to some of our roots. And happily, it's the 50-year anniversary of the 1973 countywide plan, and the Marin History Museum is their exhibit. It's being written about by Dick Spotswood and others in our papers. But this really was the groundbreaking work that set the future trajectory for Marin County, and has been an amazing success in organizing development, the preservation of agriculture, and planning around the 101 corridor for housing. The 2023 countywide plan was updated last year and continues to provide natural resource conservation and promotes compact development in the city-centered corridor and other areas. Let's go ahead and just look at that map from next slide from 1973. This will look familiar to you, probably a hand-drawn map from the 73 plan with those three corridors in color: city-centered, inland rural corridor, and coastal corridor. And we can go to the next slide, moving forward. The countywide plan furthered the planning on those corridors and brought in additional environmental ethic. Let's go to the next slide, which leaves us where we are today with the additional fourth corridor, the Baylands corridor, which many of you in this group helped bringing into being, that conserves our very precious bayland and wetlands. So we are now working with 4 environmental corridors, and we have baked into the Board of Supervisors planning the priorities for equity, environment, and the economy. Let's go to the next slide. Well, I'm sorry, before I talk just briefly about this one, I will say thank you, that I also want to add that, as many of you know, Marin County has transit-oriented development baked into our DNA, and that was by virtue of the Northwestern Pacific Railroad and the small historic cities and towns and villages that grew up along the rail line. So we actually have compact development that has happened over 100 years ago in Marin County. And I know I personally am hoping that we will take a page off of those development patterns and bring those into our city-centered corridor along the 101 highway and along our rail corridor again. So it's in our DNA to do this. And finally, I'll just touch briefly on the next slide, which is just ways, if we could go to the next slide. I think we're going backward now, so let's go forward. Great. Okay. I just want to touch on housing and transportation are, of course, inextricably linked. And every jurisdiction or county is completing their housing elements. The county has done that, and it has been approved. We will be furthering production of ADUs. We have a new county MCL, Office of Education, JPA, that we formed to develop multifamily and teacher housing on surplus properties owned by county agencies. We are furthering community land trusts in Marin, building on the work that's been done in West Marin. And then finally, a concept that was raised in the 2007 countywide plan, which I just wanted to put back on the radar screen, was a tool that was created to transfer development rights from steep hillside properties where we don't want to encourage development. And those rights could be obtained and utilized in the city center corridor. We haven't implemented this policy, but I think it could be a tool in our toolbox going forward. Next slide, please. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so as I said, housing and transportation go together. And with that, I'm going to turn it now to my colleague and friend, Brian Colbert, for the next several slides. Oh, Brian, yeah.
There we go. I'm muted. Sorry. So I just want to say, Kate, thanks for that introduction and good morning. And as Stephanie said, it's a really great opportunity to come and speak with everyone this morning. So next slide, please. There we go. So the first thing I'll just sort of talk about that I think we're all really proud about at TAM and so many community stakeholders is that the North-South Greenway won a state award for Active Transportation Project of the Year. And I just want to sort of say, as we move forward, you know, Marin has been at the forefront of so many things: environmentalism, open space, climate change, and active transportation is now really where we're focusing on. You know, we all know that we need to get out of cars, reduce cars, and really embrace multimodal. So I just really want to focus on that at a high level. And I would encourage everyone here, if you haven't tried and used it, to go on and experience it. Next slide, please. So I'd just like to talk overall about TAM. So Transportation Authority of Marin, you know, we really focus on transportation, congestion, multimodal, and we do that through a few different ways. The stakeholders and taxpayers of Marin have supported us with their tax dollars. That's a responsibility that we take very seriously, both through the initial Measure A and now Measure AA, which is essentially replaced it, and our Measure B, which is our vehicle tax. And what we do with those funds is we advance our major capital projects, such as our highway projects, our programs, which we'll talk about a little later, such as our crossing guards, our safe routes to schools. And we're planned. You know, how can we plan for growth? How can we plan to reduce congestion? How can we plan that our Marin values are embedded in our transportation? And more importantly, we support our local efforts for our unincorporated areas, our cities and towns, and all our communities, and involve things like, you know, our public transit, such as Marin Transit. And how can we really focus on our local roads? I mean, while we're all trying to move away from cars, so many of us have to use cars, but how can we also focus on making them bike and pedestrian friendly? And as I alluded to earlier, active transportation. As we know, COVID forced changes throughout our societies and communities, and we're continuing to focus on how can we adapt to those, our new traffic patterns, the work from home, are people going back to the office? You know, Marin is intimately tied with the economy and culture of San Francisco. How can we adapt to that? So we're focusing on various areas, such as traffic monitoring. What do those traffic patterns look like now? How do we think they will adapt in the future? How is the economy of the region going to look like? How will that affect our local budgets? Right now, there's a great deal of conversation around San Francisco's doom loop. But as we all know, San Francisco, like so many urban areas, is constantly reinvigorating and redefining themselves. We're trying to keep in touch with that. And finally, how can we continue to have outreach and communication with our stakeholders? Because it's a two-way street. You know, while TAM serves all of the county, so many great ideas bubble up from the grassroots. So it's important that we continue to figure out and connect with our communities in ways that work for them, in a place that works for them. And then lastly, we'll also touch about the plans for the future. We'll talk about our countywide transportation plan, which Stephanie and I both think is a really exciting opportunity for us to move forward. We know that we have to adapt to sea level rise. In Marin, we're always having a conversation about equity. How can we serve and really focus on and help the most vulnerable members of our communities? And multi-agency collaborations. Transportation involves so many agencies, all the way from our local jurisdictions, all the way to our state level agencies, such as Caltrans. And as Kate mentioned, Stephanie is our representative on the Metropolitan Transit Commission. So we need to focus on how we can collaborate those, because we all know that conservation and open space and transportation doesn't have jurisdictional boundaries. What happens in one area affects all of us. And then finally, we want to continue to develop our project pipeline, pursue and efficiently provide, and then also how can we fund new opportunities with not just our local tax dollars, but avail ourselves of state and federal dollars. Next slide, please. So here I want to talk about State Route 37. So State Route 37, I have to say, I think is a really interesting opportunity. So Marin, as you know, we have a lot of people who commute. And if you've ever come in to 37 in the morning, you leave, it's a really challenging, congested commute, and it's affecting the daily lives of those people, impacting, how they connect with their families and the economy. But I think the other thing that's going on right now is two things. One, I want to acknowledge the efforts of Senator McGuire for his help in addressing the flooding that we've been experiencing in Novato. And also, I want to recognize the vision that Congressman Huffman has laid out. Because I think 37, and I know Stephanie agrees, we have a real opportunity to not only address congestion, but if we can figure this out, and we have a new planning process here involving this and other agencies, we can figure out how to reconnect the wetlands with the bay. And this will become a paradigm model for all other wetland restoration in the country and around the world. So this is a complicated project, but I think we have a real opportunity to establish Marin, along with our neighboring counties, as a thought leader in how to do this. And we're going to talk about this a little bit later, about the partnership and some of the things that we're working on. Next slide, please. So here we are. This is the flood protection plan. And you can see, I'll just briefly go over it. The environmental review process is underway right now. And the focus right now is to replace the Novato Creek Bridge with a causeways to address sea level rise. And if you can see that date, it's 2130. So you can see transportation really involves thinking about problems today, recognizing that we need to address it, and these are long-term problems. So we're partnering with all agencies. The draft EIR has been released, and there'll be a public meeting on September 21st. So we'll be talking about this project a little bit later on. But like I said before, this is a real opportunity to talk about open space conservation and how transportation can partner with all those stakeholders. Next slide, please. And I believe, Stephanie, this goes to you.
Yes, it does. Okay, I wanted to share another flood-related project, long needed, in Marin City in the 101 corridor. As you know, we routinely experience significant flooding in this corridor during our strong storm weather in the winter. And so I wanted to make this group aware that with both a FEMA grant that the county has obtained, as well as planning funding from Senator McGuire, we have embarked on a major project focused on the Donahue interchange area. And this project will not completely solve flooding, but it will definitely reduce the number of days there is flooding and the amount of flooding on 101. As many of you know, the shopping center is effectively in an old wetlands. And when the highway was put in, that effectively became a dam across the wetland area. The pond that remains is a vestige of this wetland. It was dredged many years ago to create the pond. It has, as you'll see in the upper portion of the diagram, there is currently a red dotted line red for an existing culvert that leads under the highway out to the bay. In the future, as a very last step in a phase project that I'll describe to you, we look forward to a second culvert being placed under the highway by Caltrans. But in the short term, we hope this winter to install project number 1 of the portable pump that will go in just at the corner of Donahue near the interchange. And it will take water that collects in that intersection at Donahue and impedes the egress and ingress of the Marin City residents. It will pump water up the red line, a temporary piping, to the pond where the water can be collected and then pumped out. You know what? I got that completely backwards. We're actually going to take the water from the pond and pump it out in the storm drain system that we have. So forgive me on that. Project 2, which we hope to implement next year, is to create a permanent pump station and replace the temporary pump. Project 3 is a flood wall, that yellow line along the eastern boundary of the pond. There's a small wall in there now that would be slightly increased and fortified just to create another barrier from the highway. And then finally, we hope to dredge the Marin City pond to increase the capacity slightly. And then, as I said, end with a secondary culvert across 101. So we're working closely with Caltrans and the county to make these things happen. The shopping center owners are cooperating with us, which is great. So you hopefully will see some relief this fall or this winter. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm just going to talk about 2 major projects here in particular. The first is Marin Sonoma Narrows. And again, this roadway, this highway is incredibly congested, and it really affects our workforce. So the final segment of the HOV lanes has begun in July 2022, and we are expecting these HOV lanes to open in late 2025. I'm sure almost everyone on the webinar right now is familiar with that. But then another project that you might not be aware of right now is the connection between northbound 101 and eastbound 580. And here we're going to really focus on not just the car improvements, but we're really focused on multimodal improvements to serve and meet the local needs of that community. I've been over there, I'm sure as you many have, and it's just incredibly challenging for pedestrian and bikes. And I really think that this is another example of how transportation planning is not just focusing on making improvements for cars, but for also focusing on making long-lasting multimodal improvements. That environmental process is due to begin late in 2023 or early in 2024. Next slide, please.
So I'm going to speak briefly about the TAM sea level rise study, and I want to acknowledge we have a number of TAM staff members joining us today, as well as Chris Chu, our sea level rise guru at the county. So TAM, as you may know, set out a little bit of funding in the expenditure plan we passed in 2019 to work on sea level rise issues. And this particular aspect will be looking at our roads and highway corridors and the impacts of sea level rise on those corridors. We have a lot of data that's already been developed as part of the vulnerability assessment that the county and cities and agencies all work together. But we're going to take this now to the next level of depth and detail in understanding the impacts of sea level rise, to really begin to formulate a strategy for how we're going to address transportation and sea level rise in the future. So the scope is here to identify the key transportation locations and facilities that will be impacted. We have a range of technical solutions and concept designs we can apply to abate the impacts of sea level rise. And so we'll apply those, identify the benefits and the challenges as well as costs, and come up with some recommendations for approaching, keeping our very vital road and highway network working as sea level rise approaches. We have just kicked off the study process, and most of the work, as I understand it, is very interior right now, analyzing available data and developing concepts. There will be a public input component in the future where we'll bring some of these concepts forward. Next slide.
So I'm going to talk about TAM's countywide transportation plan. And this is a really exciting development because for its history up until this point, TAM has been focused on congestion management. And we will now be the last county in the Bay Area to have a countywide transportation plan. And the main difference is that this plan is going to focus on Marin's broader social, economic, and environmental goals. And we're going to tie those goals and map them onto the measures that I spoke about before, Measure A, Measure B, and the 2017. And I think it really allows us to move forward and see, much like the county plan in 1973, how we can really define how transportation works with all of the challenges and opportunities that we have right now. We're just kicking off the plan right now. It's going to be about an 18-month process. TAM staff has done a lot of work. And I certainly have to give kudos to the previous chairs of TAM, including Stephanie, because it's a lot of work simply to get to this point. There's going to be a whole lot of stakeholder engagement and outreach. And so what we're going to really figure out is how can we take TAM into the future while blending and focusing on the promises with tax dollars and the plans and the programs that we've already made in the past. So I hope that all of you will continue to keep this on your radar scopes and bring your energy ideas as we move forward on this. Next slide, please.
Aha, back to me. Okay, so in my capacity as MTC commissioner, MTC, of course, is coordinating with the land use portion that was created in Plan Bay Area 2050, which is undergoing right now a limited and focused update to Plan Bay Area 2050, and recently had a public meeting, I think, here last week or the week before. So this is some updates and tweaks, and we'll hear more about the outcomes of that. But I think the blueprint of Plan Bay Area has been laid, and it will take a concerted effort to move forward in the direction that is laid out to focus growth and development within the Bay Area and focus on creating more affordable housing within the Bay Area. The Transit 2050 will be a plan on reimagining transit, and that was in the works before COVID happened, and COVID, as Brian has said, upended everything transit-wise and commute-wise, as we all know. So I'm expecting to see a major effort looking at transit of the future and how we fund it. So next slide, please.
So I'm going to talk about TAM's alternative fuels program. And if you want to address climate change, you need to address transportation, and you need to either get people out of cars or you need to electrify your transportation. So TAM has committed staff resources and tax dollars to our alternative fuels program. And TAM, as a public agency, we've been really focused on public agencies and how we can put chargers in a way for the communities and focused on how we can help our local communities electrify their fleets. So we've gotten a lot of really great interest with that and execution. We're focusing on partnering with the county on the EV acceleration plan. And we're also doing a lot of outreach. So through our partners, we have Clean Fleet Expos. We've had electrified booths at the county fairs. We've been focusing on e-bikes. And I think we're going to continue to focus on how we can meet the charging needs of our community as we move forward. Next slide, please. So here, I want to talk about our 101 interchange studies. And this really focuses on our interchanges in Marin County up and down the 101 were designed long ago, and they don't really focus on bike and ped safety. So what TAM has done is we've studied the 12 interchanges that we think have the highest use of bike and ped challenges or safety, and how we can improve them. So if you look at the chart right there, you'll see the 12. And right now we've decided which ones we need to focus on. We've established a baseline to funding, and you'll see the last three there: East Blythedale, Manuel T. Freitas, Amelendale del Prado, Nave Drive. These are the first ones for the phases. So you'll see those improvements coming throughout your communities. Next slide, please. And then Safe Routes to Schools. So this one I'm actually super excited about. I have a 13-year-old daughter, for those of you who don't know, and I remember how exciting and really great it was to be able to walk her to our local schools. Safe Routes to Schools, I think, is so powerful because what it does is it creates and engender a culture of our young people not having to be in cars to get back and forth to school, something that carries with them throughout, I think, their whole life. So you can see we, as part of that program, we have 100 crossing guards. We have now 58 schools participating. About 50% of all our school trips are green. We've expanded our outreach, including bilingual programs. And the thing that really excites me now about the program is we're going to focus on how can we move the dial. Ultimately, we would love to have 100% of our school kids walking and biking to school. But, for so many families and where they live, that's not feasible. But I think we're really focused on how we can continue to increase this culture of multimodal transit for our young people and their families. Next slide, please. And then the project and planning pipeline. Here are some of the major projects we've got going on. And Stephanie and I will be happy to sort of take further questions during the Q&A. We're planning for Mobility Hub launching in fiscal year 2024, local road and safety. We're always partnering with other agencies. And so, wildfire evacuation is always top of mind. So always thinking about how we can improve our transit networks in case something happens, how people can get out. Project development in fiscal year 24 for part-time transit lanes on the 101 southbound to improve public transit. And then you'll see all over Marin our local projects. We're focused on the hub, which located in San Anselmo, the Tamalpais, overcrossing major roads, and more. So keep a lookout for those. Next slide, please.
Okay, I will round out our slides and then we'll move to questions. So we were asked, what is the future of transit by Kate? And that is a very good question, Kate. We'll all have to get our crystal balls out. But let me just say this. I think all of you may know that our local Marin Transit Agency is an agency funded in large part by our Transportation Authority sales tax. We did receive this wonderful $31 million grant for a new electric transit bus facility. And so we are working feverishly to identify a location for that. But in the end, Marin Transit is about serving transit-dependent riders for the most part. And this is what accounts for our having some of the highest ridership return in the Bay Area, because we are very much focused on serving the people who do not have other options or would prefer to take transit. Now with Golden Gate Bridge District, the story is different. That, as you know, is largely a commute service. And given how much commutes have changed and work at home continues to be with us, Golden Gate has cut back a lot of its commute service to right size what it offers. At the same time, we're working on a new strategic plan that we hope will bring forward a vision of what Golden Gate can offer, not only in Marin County, but to communities over in the East Bay who have residents who commute to jobs here, as well as to Sonoma County. So I expect to see some shifts on our bus transit. I will say the ferry service has come back very well. Interestingly, though, a lot of the service is now recreational use from people coming from San Francisco to visit Marin County on the weekends. So we are growing that aspect of Golden Gate's business while we retool our commute service. And with that, we're on to the next slide, which says thank you and questions. I think we can take the slides down. And Kate, however you want to handle the questions, we'll hand it back to you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Stephanie, and thank you, Brian, for that really comprehensive presentation. We have two new members joining us in the room. Our owl is not working today, but I wanted to let you know that Terry Green and Barbara Strong have also joined us in the room, and then we will change the view of the present. Let me just see if I can do that. Yeah. So we'll get also the other folks in the room on the screen. I am just going to start off with just one question, and then I encourage all of you to ask questions while we're so lucky that both Brian and Stephanie are here. As you know, as MCL wrote a recent letter to TAM board when TAM was considering their strategic plan for their two funding sources, both the vehicle registration, Measure B, which brings in about $2 million per year, and Measure AA, the sales tax funding source, which brings in currently about, I believe, maybe 35 million, up from 27 million. MCL has been following transportation, not only in terms of infrastructure impacts to the natural environment and our built environment, and looking for ways to plan for the future, to integrate transportation in an environmentally sensitive way. But also we are very focused on greenhouse gas reduction. And, we've just wondering, it took a lot of environmental advocacy to get TAM to include greenhouse gas reduction as one of their goals in Measure AA. And we would really like to see greenhouse gas reduction included as a goal in every project that moves forward and in every planning process that moves forward. And I was just wondering, I mean, that could include making streets safer for bicyclists to feel comfortable on roads. So where there is a wide lane, looking for, is there room for a buffer for the bicycle path on that road? It could be, when you're planning projects, integrating transit from the very beginning of the planning process. So for Northgate Town Center, which is coming up right now, in retrospect, the Kaiser improvement up at Los Gamos, transit was not in the beginning of the planning process, but it is now very much recognized that people would like to use transit to go there. And most recently, I attended the Freitas Parkway roundabout in terms of the 101 interchange. And while the city of San Rafael and Caltrans were working together on that planning project, Golden Gate Transit, which is the transit provider in that area, was not included in that early planning process. And so as a result, there has to be some after the fact planning on how it's best for that bus service to get to pick up people there. So I'm just asking you, as both TAM commissioner board members and in all of the other ways that you participate in the county and transportation planning, how greenhouse gas emission planning and all of the ways it can be thought about can be integrated in projects and plans going forward.
You want me to
Right.
jump? You want me
Sure.
to jump? Yeah,
Yeah.
so look, I think that's look, I agree with you wholeheartedly that the paradigm should be to include transit planning in every project. And certainly I think it's a great first thing to say, how is this going to affect greenhouse gas reduction? And I think those two questions are well placed right now as we embark on the countywide transportation plan, right? Because as we're putting in those plans, like that is part of, I think, what the foundational piece would be. So I think you'll see the countywide transportation plan reflect that.
Great.
I think some of the challenges that we have right now, though, are the following: is that so very often TAM is working with other agencies, or we're trying to leverage other grants that are state and federal from the Bay Area. And sometimes our Marin priorities may not necessarily dovetail with other priorities. So it's just a fine line that we have to walk. And that is to say, I'm not talking about compromising our values, but I am sort of saying, well, look, do we want to do that and know that we may be a bit ahead of the curve and we're taking ourselves out of funding projects that may help us move our priorities on the ground. But I can tell you that, certainly know from Stephanie and other commissioners, we're focused on what can we do for greenhouse gas reduction. And one of the things we're really trying to figure out is TAM the best body to figure out what's the return on investment? How can we really measure the progress that we're having in the county, because we have so many people doing the work, either our small climate groups in our local jurisdiction, groups such as yours, or at the county level. Stephanie, would you care to add anything?
I think you covered it. I just wanted to speak, Kate, very briefly to your point about Los Gamos and Kaiser. And I know Supervisor Sackett is laser focused on bringing transit to that area and reworking the possible stop locations to make it easier for people to access. So the planning on that was a little bumpy. And I think what Brian just described, sometimes planning is messy, as you know, trying to get all the players to work together. But I again think the countywide plan will give us a real ability to kind of bring all of this together, come up with some goals and themes, and presumably buy-in from all the agencies and organizations.
Great, thank you. So we have a question in the room from Roger Roberts, and our owl is not working, so I'm just going to turn my computer this way. You have to speak up, Roger.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Hi, Roger. Yes.
We all experience increased congestion everywhere particularly in the population corridor along 101. And I wonder what TAM is doing to address congestion issues, which are increasing, particularly in the rush hour times, and what TAM thinks they can do to address that.
That is always the $64,000 question. So I'll just say briefly and then hand it to Brian. We all know there's no silver bullet on congestion, right? It's silver buckshot. So we have to do lots of things. And so we are working in the northern part of the county with our Bus on Shoulder project, try and use the shoulder lanes to run transit to make that a more attractive option for commuters in Marin who use that 101 corridor. Brian mentioned the bike improvements that we are really keen on. And we know that it takes a reduction of 5% of congestion to make the rest of the traffic flow better. So we don't have to reduce it by 50% for you to feel some of the benefits. We build out our network piece by piece, and so we're still building pieces of this multimodal network, and we have more to do. But I think we are conscious, Roger, about congestion, certainly the increased housing that we need to and want to produce. We need to figure out how people are going to get around, and that will be part of the planning we do with the countywide plan. Brian, anything to add?
The only thing I would add is, at school congestion, right? Like so much of the congestion in Marin, particularly on rush hour, is just connected with getting the kids around to school. I mean, it's the start of school, and we can all sort of tell the difference between the summer and now. And so I think to whatever extent we can figure out how to get our young people back in school, back and forth to school safely without having them in a car, we will all be better off for it today and tomorrow. So that's the only thing that I would care to add on that.
Okay, I'm going to take a couple of other questions in the room, and then I will get to the questions from the people on Zoom. Paul, did you have a question?
Yeah, no, actually, it's not a question, it's a suggestion, and that is the coordination with various agencies in this county, particularly with the point that Kate brought up about making sure that some of the planning for transportation is considered at the front end of some of these large projects that are being considered, like Northgate Mall redevelopment, which seem to have been a little overlooked at the front end. The Marin County planning directors meet monthly. And what might be good, and I know it's attended, I see Derek is on this call, and I believe Scott McDonald is also on this call, and I know they're regular attendees at that meeting, is perhaps for some of that there be a commitment by the planning directors to share information on current projects that are being proposed that could affect some of the other agencies in this county, i.e. Marin Transit or the Golden Gate Bridge District at the front end. The cities, most of the cities have a referral process. So when projects come in, plans are sent out for comments to various agencies, and it's usually like PG&E, et cetera, but Marin Transit and the Bridge District should be on the list for large projects so that they get wind of these projects at the front end, so there isn't sort of catch up later on. Just a suggestion.
Okay, I have two more questions in the room. Three more questions in the room. Stephanie or Brian, did you have any response to that, or just?
Great idea, Paul.
Okay.
We will work on that.
Okay, so great. Now I'm going to move to Nona.
Yes, thank you. What a wonderful overview that you've given. Under the heading of electric vehicles, I was glad, however, that you added at the very end, I'm not certain how, exactly safety and parent education. And I would add that, I have seen some wonderful benefits coming from the use of electric bikes particularly on the Sausalito Mill Valley multi-use path. Just excellent use, but we've all seen egregious behavior that is scary. This goes far beyond just parent education. The reports are coming in, not just around the nation, but around the world, that just from medical reports alone, that as the electric bike technology advances, the misuse goes along with the proper use and with the constructive use. So how are you building in, really going beyond just parent education, which is badly needed? We know that around the county. But how are you going beyond that to make sure that we keep track of how electric bikes are in fact regulated? And there are still some big gaps in how that is managed in various jurisdictions.
Can I jump in on that quickly? Yeah, so I'll tell you, e-bikes are certainly a boon in many ways. but all our local jurisdictions right now are struggling with the challenges. And I'll say, you know, I know that our town managers, our council members, and our law enforcement are in constant communication. I myself had the Marin Bicycle Coalition come to downtown San Anselmo and offer even more education, because I think, you know, it's sort of like with wildfire. We can always do more. But that said, I do know that at TAM we have been following what's been going on legislatively at the state level, because in many ways this is, you know, really beyond, you know, San Anselmo or even TAM. Like we really need to figure out what is the right balance between sort of state regulation of who can handle these e-bikes and parental education. I mean, we've already seen some horrific accidents and whatnot, and it's a difficult challenge. And frankly, you know, I think there's not one solution. We will continue to have to adapt and iterate as these bikes continue to proliferate, and we recognize the benefits and the challenges of them.
I just want to make sure that, we want to make sure that this is recognized in the language. And the language at this point does point to the need for safety and for parent education. And as you point out, there are going to be multiple solutions to multiple challenges. So please keep that in the wording. So it's a very specific challenge for TAM to take on. Thanks very much.
Thanks for your question.
Jack Crystal.
This is Jack Crystal, and I would like to share with you that personally, I'm delighted that finally, from what you have shown us, Marin City and the flooding is going to be attended to and will be solved. We all hope. But in addition to that, a little further up north and on the other side of Highway 101, and where the foot of Highway 1 starts, below and on both sides of the Richardson Bay Bridge, all the flooding that takes place there as a result of sea level rise and very high tides and rains is being simply ignored in this entire presentation. And I would like to know what's being planned so that that is solved and taken care of, because people that live and work there, there will tragically be some consequences to ignoring the Manzanita area within what's known as Tam Valley. Can I have some answers on that, please?
Stephanie, do you want to take that one?
Sure, I do. And I want to say good morning to Miss Terry Green, who's here with us today, and has been so instrumental in the work in Marin City. I want to say two things. First, about Marin City, the work I showed today is the short-term plan. There is a longer-term plan, and Terry has been part of that with both FEMA doing a much more extensive look at longer term and more ambitious fixes for Marin City access. Our Congressman Jared Huffman has been involved in that as well. So there will be another effort by FEMA. And additionally, Caltrans has a long-term sea level rise plan that has gotten on their list of things to do. It's a SHOP project, so that's a good thing. But the significance then, Jack, to what you just asked, is that the long-term Caltrans plan, as well as the FEMA studies and effort that will occur, are going to look at that entire 101 corridor from Marin City through Shoreline Highway, Tam Junction. We know Manzanita has chronic flooding problems. Marin City was the priority for right now, but we're not leaving Tam Valley unsolved. This will I hope Caltrans will bring forward their project this coming year for public input on the front end about what longer term solutions in this corridor would look like. Elevating 101 is probably one of the possibilities, but it's not the only one. So Jack, just know that we've not forgotten about Tam Valley. It's in the line to be addressed by Caltrans and the county and FEMA.
And Stephanie, Terry had a question as well.
Yes. Thank you, Stephanie and Brian, for your review. But there's two things. One, I want to talk about the fact that on the Cal Enviro screen, Marin City has 99 when it comes to pollution. We need an eco barrier wall up the 101 freeway. Yes, in front of where the pond is, but also as you are going up towards San Francisco. 99, that's really important. When you look at the issues of air quality, air pollution, also we can look at noise pollution. We can look at an eco barrier that will address the flooding and safety issues. I had an opportunity to come from Sonoma the other day, and I literally counted 12 eco barrier walls in Marin County, yet we don't have one in Marin City. And that's something that we really need to address. I know it'll take not only TAM, but it'll take Caltrans and others, but this is very important that we have this eco barrier wall. And yes, the other thing is, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Stephanie, is the fact that when we look at the issues of flooding in Marin City, we look at the issues of the fact that we only have one way in and one way out. And right at the entrance of Marin City, as you know, it's been flooding over 80 years in Marin City. And it's because we don't have a drainage system. And so, yes, we're looking at an additive, and that is at the base of Donahue Street, coming down the watershed there. If we had a drainage system that leads out, down Donahue, up under the tunnel, and then out to the bay, that would be ideal. And so that's something that we want to put forward. We've been talking about this for years. And so we want to keep it in everyone's minds. This is what, when you talk about equity and you talk about the fact that you want to address the needs of vulnerable communities need to be at the table when decisions are made. And so these are the things. And yes, I do sit on the Marin City Community Services District Board. I am the executive director of Marin City Climate Resilience and Health Justice. And we've been working and looking at these issues for years. And so we want to, again, be a part of the decision-making. If equity is going to be the thing that's everyone talking about, let's make that a reality. Thank you.
Okay, we have thank you, Terry. We have some questions online also. We're running a little bit over. I hope Stephanie and Brian, you could stay a couple more minutes. Warren Wells.
Thanks, everyone. Going back to the first two questions, could you talk a little bit more about your thinking and the tension between spending money on staff time on projects that reduce greenhouse gas emissions and those that are, more primarily intended to reduce car commute times, such as the Marin Sonoma Narrows, the 101 580 direct connector, which will likely increase total vehicle miles traveled by making it easier and faster to drive. Do you see an opportunity cost to directing, our scarce resources to projects that increase automobile throughput at the expense of projects that might make walking or biking easier, fund additional transit service, or help us adapt to sea level rise? Thanks.
I'll take a stab at that and then turn it over to Brian. So good to see you, Warren. The Transportation Authority of Marin's expenditure plan has 4 main buckets. And so it's never a zero-sum game, one or the other. We are always working on all modes of transportation because we think that's the solution, is a multimodal transportation system. Not all modes work for all commuters. The 580 connector and the 101 are for commuters coming in to take jobs in Marin County, as well as recreational travel for people through the county. So that will not go away and not get solved with bicycles, unfortunately. So that's there and we have to deal with it. And it goes back to Brian's point that we know we need to electrify the car trips that we have. And then as some of you who followed TAM board meeting, we recently had a study of the North-South Greenway at my request, and how well are we doing building out what is essentially Marin County's bicycle freeway. And we identified the portions that have been completed and the portions that are yet to be done. And we're going to take a deeper dive looking at the portions that need to be done and look cost benefit analysis and opportunities to get those things done quickly and cost effectively. So building out that part of the network is a concern. We've also talked about transit. There will be a time finally to really focus on our local connections, and I'll let Brian take it from here. But you know, so many of our trips are local trips, and I think we need to focus on those networks as well.
Yeah, thanks, Stephanie. All I'll add to that is I think your first point is the one that really resonates with me, is that these are not binary choices, and that while the Transit Authority of Marin is certainly focused on Marin, I think we can always broaden our horizon and recognize that when people are stuck in traffic, to come in here and serve and provide services and essential services in our community, we have to be mindful of them, because we're all human beings, and we need to be able to focus on how can they get back to their families and their quality of life. And that's sort of where I come at. These are difficult choices. There's no easy answers. And we try and do the best that we can, as you alluded to, Warren, with limited staff time and being mindful of the limited tax dollars that we have.
Great. Jeff?
Well, good morning, everyone, and a very interesting presentation. And thank you, Brian and Stephanie, for joining us all today. I'd like to focus specifically on the Direct Connector project. Certainly, Brian, you are correct in noting that part of the objective of the project is to address bicycle safety and pedestrian safety at Bellum. However, many in the Santa Fe community feel that this project is resulting in greater impact on Santa Fe than benefit. And we presented, that is, Resilient Shore presented a proposal for relocating access to 580 to a new interchange about midway between the Richmond-Santa Fe Bridge and 101. And this proposal was considered by TAM and ultimately found to be feasible, but not sufficiently beneficial to pursue. However, what this does suggest, to me anyway, and I think to many others, is that the Direct Connector project is tending to be looked at in single isolation rather than as part of a cohesive, coordinated corridor planning study that looks at the 580 corridor all the way from Contra Costa County to the 101 interchange, 101 Sir Francis Drake interchange.
Jeff,
Go ahead.
we're running short on time, so if you finish the question.
Very well. My concern here is that not enough is being done to look at these things cohesively. And what I'd like to find out is, what is TAM going to do to address these existing problems, particularly for access to the Canal neighborhood at Bellum? What is it doing to make sure that this 101 Direct Connector does not impair the ability to address these problems in the future?
Okay, we're going to give you Stephanie and Brian if you'd like to address that question. And we've got a few more. I'm going to try to.
Yeah, Brian,
pretty quickly.
take a stab at that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so Jeff, I think Jeffrey, you and I have talked about this project before. You're a thoughtful guy. I think the hard question is this, and you sort of talked about this project sort of on a certain level reminds me of State Route 37, in that it's really hard to conceptualize how this big transportation problem can meet and balance the local needs. And I will tell you, Stephanie and I got a presentation on this project about a month ago, and it's a continuing balance act that we're doing. And I will tell you that I would certainly be, we're running out of time, but I would certainly be happy to meet with you offline to hear your presentation again and talk about those ideas with an open mind and in good faith.
Thank you, Brian.
I
Larry.
would just
Oh, I'm
add,
sorry, Stephanie. Go
just
ahead.
very briefly, I think the countywide transportation plan is another opportunity to look holistically, and we will. So,
Thank you. Larry, did you have a question?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for a great presentation this morning, and I will be brief. So I've been riding motor scooters, the type that you get licensed, like a Vespa. I have a Vespa. I've been riding it for years and years and years. I put about 1,000 miles a year on it, just going less than 5 miles back and forth on trips. It reduces impact tremendously. And you go to Asia and all over, you see nothing but motor scooters. Those are moving more toward electrification. And that's not really being discussed. We're focusing on e-bikes and e-scooters, non-licensee scooters. And I think there's a real opportunity to reduce impact if there were incentives in place for people to get on motor scooters, essentially. And they're actually a lot of fun on top of it. That's my comments this morning.
Thank you, Larry.
I just wanted to jump in real quick. Larry, I couldn't agree with you more. I saw a couple of Vespas go by over the weekend. I thought, gosh, you hardly see those. And they look safe and they're well constructed. And so my thought is that part of the solution to the e-bikes is going to be the design changes that I'm sure will occur. If you think of the early mountain bikes, they were kind of junker bikes that got retrofitted. I don't think the e-bikes we have now are terribly sophisticated in their design or their safety features. And so I think one of the things we will see over time is more safety features, and those bikes will evolve into something much more roadworthy than what we have. And right on to you for riding Vespa. Good.
Well, thank you so much.
You bet.
So we're running out of time. We've got some great questions in the chat. Wondering if you would like to, I don't know if you can see those, Brian and Stephanie, but if you'd like to address one of them, and then maybe we could, if you be so kind as maybe to send an answer to, answer those after. We'll include those in the minutes when we distribute them after the meeting.
Well, I'll take Carleen Cullen's suggestion that we evaluate GHG reduction when determining prioritization of projects. That's a great suggestion, Carleen. Thanks for making it. I think that makes a lot of sense.
Stephanie?
So the EV Accelerator project is probably a longer discussion, but it will be coming back to the county this fall, so stay tuned for that. Let's see. Funding opportunities, Inflation Reduction Act, yes. Brian, you want to take the Highway 37 transit bus question?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always a conversation about public transit buses, but in order for public transit buses to be more effective, they've got to have their own sort of special lanes. Otherwise, they sort of get then stuck in traffic, and then public transit gets a bad name, and then you just sort of run into those other barriers. So that has been thought about, and perhaps over time it will evolve. We're trying to put that kind of program here in Marin, like bus on shoulder, so that people see there's a material value to their commute time by using public transit. So thanks for that question.
And then any opinions at this point on the effort to reopen the Alto Tunnel?
Sure. That's a short-term, long-term question. We've done a fair amount of study on what needs to happen there. There's more information that's coming in. The costs probably need to be trued up again. We need to look at the legal issues and see if anything has changed on that front. I think that will be a project that unfolds in the future. I don't see that happening right now, just because we're trying to build so many other projects that will carry people throughout the county. So I think we're looking to make the existing Camino Alto and Horse Hill routes work as well as possible, while we continue to zero in on what it would take to reopen the Alto Tunnel. So not off the list, just one of our longer term projects, and there's more longer term projects. Alto Tunnel is not alone that way.
Well, we hope that you and Brian will come back again to discuss some longer term projects at a future date. And I hope everyone here will just join me in thanking both Stephanie and Brian. We really appreciate your time. We know you're busy people, and this has been a wonderful opportunity to learn more about transportation in the county. So thanks so very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
You bet. And come to our public meetings on the countywide plan. We'd love to have you. So
Okay.
stay tuned. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.